Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey really into the heart of a global movement, one that's touched millions of lives worldwide. And, sometimes the most profound impacts, they don't come from the big pronouncements or the flashy leaders.
No, often they come from unexpected places, don't they?
Yeah.
From quiet determination,
Yeah.
from just, steady, consistent work by people facing huge challenges.
Exactly. And our focus for this deep dive is a man just like that. His legacy is immense, truly, but his personal style, remarkably understated. We're talking about Dr. Robert Smith.
Better known within the fellowship as Dr. Bob, the Midwestern co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He really did embody that spirit of humble service.
That's right. So we're going to peel back the layers on this really fascinating figure, give you a rich biographical sketch. And we're drawing primarily from AA's own definitive biography, Dr. Bob and the Good Oldtimers.
Right, and some other key texts, too, things like The Language of the Heart, and, of course, the big book itself.
Absolutely. Our mission here is to explore his very pragmatic, sometimes really no-nonsense approach to recovery, his deep commitment to helping others, and how his practical wisdom, well, it created this crucial sort of stabilizing counterbalance to his co-founder, Bill Wilson.
Bill being the more, let's say, visionary and expansive spirit. It was a fascinating dynamic.
It really was. So get ready for maybe some surprising insights into the very early days of a phenomenon that genuinely transformed addiction recovery forever. Okay, so let's unpack this. Before he was Dr. Bob of AA fame, he was Dr. Robert Smith, a prominent surgeon, right, in Akron, Ohio.
That's correct. He had a respected career, a seemingly stable home life. But the sources, they really reveal this profound internal struggle going on beneath the surface.
So what do the sources tell us about his early life, and how did alcohol start to take hold? It seems like it kind of crept up on him.
Well, the main biography, Dr. Bob and the Good Oldtimers, it paints this vivid picture. On the surface, yeah, pretty conventional, successful guy. He married Ann Ripley, who was a Wellesley student.
Oh, interesting.
And only after this incredibly long courtship.
Yeah.
17 years.
17 years. Wow. That suggests a certain steadiness,
Right.
loyalty, maybe?
Exactly. It suggests a deep-seated commitment in his personal life. He wasn't some reckless character by nature. But the sources show that even before Prohibition kicked in nationally,
Yeah.
Dr. Bob was slowly, steadily developing a really significant problem with alcohol. And the thing is, he wasn't fully aware of how insidious it was, how it was progressing.
So he was drinking more, but maybe rationalizing it. Didn't see it as a huge issue yet.
Precisely. He often brushed it off, didn't perceive it as serious in those early stages. And what's really crucial to grasp here is how this period shows the progressive nature of alcoholism itself.
How so?
Well, what starts as maybe seemingly controlled drinking, or even as we'll see medically justified use, can just morph insidiously into this profound dependency. And his external success, his social standing, it masked this intense internal battle, this growing inability to actually stop drinking.
That's a powerful irony, isn't it? His medical background, a field focused on health, it contributed to the problem and then eventually offered a path out. You mentioned Prohibition. How did that whole great American experiment affect his situation?
Yes, Prohibition. That's where it gets particularly fascinating and, frankly, tragic for him. Because with Prohibition, this interesting and really problematic loophole opened up specifically for doctors.
Oh, loophole.
Yeah. The government allowed physicians almost unlimited supplies of grain alcohol for medicinal purposes. So while everyone else is struggling to find booze, Dr. Bob...
He had a legitimate way to get it because he was a doctor.
Exactly. His professional standing gave him a pathway to maintain his habit, even when it was illegal for pretty much everyone else. The biography actually recounts how, quote, many times during those dry years, Dr. Bob went to the phone book, picked out a name at random, then filled out the prescription that would get him a pint of medicinal alcohol.
Wow. Just picked a random name for his own use.
For his own consumption, yes. It highlights this potent and honestly dangerous mix of professional access and this growing insatiable dependency. He could tell himself, I'm a doctor, I need this for my nerves, or it's medicinal, even as his life was slowly coming apart.
That sounds exactly like what the text calls alcoholic logic.
It is. That's the perfect term for it. This pattern of rationalization, of self-deception that lets the addiction just keep going. Despite all the evidence of harm stacking up, he could justify it as legitimate, even medical.
It's a trap.
A total psychological trap, where alcoholics unconsciously put conditions on their sobriety, believing they can handle it if this happens or if that changes. But as the book Living Sober points out, alcoholism doesn't care about ifs. It doesn't just go away so you can drink normally on special occasions.
No, it's always there.
Always. And Dr. Bob's continued use, despite his medical knowledge, despite the obvious negative impacts he must have been feeling, it just underscores how insidious that progression is.
So alcoholic logic, yeah, that's sharp. His profession, instead of protecting him, gave him the means. What was the deeper impact, then, on his personal life, his demeanor, beyond that public facade?
Well, he did remain a prominent man in Akron. He kept up that public face of success, respectability, which is, typical for many high-functioning alcoholics. They live this double life.
Right.
But internally, the struggle was profound, deeply isolating. Other early AA members later remembered him saying things like, when he was exhausted, lighting up a cigarette, he'd mutter, "Well, here's another nail in my coffin."
So he knew he had some awareness of the self-destruction.
Oh, absolutely. It gives us this poignant glimpse into a deep self-awareness, maybe even a kind of dark humor, about his own destructive patterns, even while he was still caught in them. He saw the path he was on, intellectually, but felt powerless to change course. The compulsion, that alcoholic logic, just kept him trapped.
And that experience trying to cure hangovers with more drinking, that's a classic, terrible cycle.
It really is. As the big book describes it, that morning drink to fix the shakes, it just worsens the cycle.
Yeah.
It shows how it progresses from a habit to this consuming addiction. And it really drives home that alcoholism isn't just, a moral failing or a lack of willpower. It's a complex, progressive illness.
Right.
Affects everything. So the real turning point for Dr. Bob, and really for AA itself, was his meeting with Bill Wilson. Now, Bill's own journey to sobriety was pretty unique, marked by what he called, I think it's the language of the heart, a spiritual perception.
A spiritual perception.
Yeah, one that was electrically sudden and absolutely convincing. For Bill, it wasn't gradual. It was this profound, immediate, unwavering spiritual awakening. Boom. It just instantly freed him from the compulsion to drink.
Wow. Almost miraculous then.
For him, it really felt that way, especially after years and years of desperate struggle. It was a huge personal transformation.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Bill Wilson lands in Akron. His business venture has just completely collapsed. He's alone in a strange town, totally vulnerable, and, as the book says, scared to death of getting drunk.
Right. A really precarious moment.
So what makes him, in that state, decide to seek out another alcoholic, someone he doesn't even know? Why not just give in to the fear and the urge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And his motivation, it came from this deep personal understanding of his own condition and what had actually worked for him. He said it himself. It's recorded in the language of the heart. He said, "I was no longer a teacher or a preacher.
Yeah.
I was an alcoholic who knew that he needed another alcoholic as much as that one could possibly need me."
Yeah.
That was it. That was the core impulse.
So it wasn't just altruism. He needed it for himself.
Exactly. He was driven by that urge, this recognition that his own sobriety, which felt so fragile, especially alone in Akron, it required him to reach out. He realized that carrying the message, sharing his experience, wasn't just for the other person. It was crucial for his own continued recovery.
That makes so much sense.
So he gets connected through some local contacts and soon finds himself face-to-face with Dr. Bob. And this really speaks to that fundamental need for shared experience and recovery. It's what became the absolute core of AA meetings, right?
Right. That idea that you come in alone, addicted, but find others who get it.
Exactly. As I think A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps puts it, you find others share your experience, you can ask for help, speak your truth, be vulnerable, and still feel safe. It was this mutual need for connection, for identification, that really brought Bill and Bob together. Bill's vulnerability, his fear, actually became his strength at that moment. It pushed him to seek out another suffering person.
So it was a mutual need, a realization he couldn't stay sober alone, even if Dr. Bill wasn't, actively looking for help right then.
Right. Dr. Bob wasn't seeking it out.
So what happened in that first historic conversation? Given Dr. Bob's own deep denial and alcoholic logic, what did Bill say that finally broke through?
Well, Bill noticed something interesting. He observed that Dr. Bob, despite his obvious struggles, despite his intellect and professional standing, actually knew more of spiritual things than I did. He'd even been involved with the Oxford Groupers, this spiritual fellowship that was around then.
So he wasn't spiritually ignorant.
Not at all. Yet, as Bill put it, somehow he simply couldn't get sober. And this highlights a really crucial point AA would build on. Just having intellectual understanding or even spiritual knowledge by itself wasn't enough to break the compulsion of alcoholism.
Okay, so what did Bill do?
Bill then used what he later called the medical sledgehammer. He essentially told him what alcoholism was and just how fatal it could be. And he was drawing on this groundbreaking knowledge he'd gotten from a Dr. William Silkworth.
Silkworth.
Yeah, a doctor who understood alcoholism not as a moral failing, which was the common view then, but as a disease, a twofold illness.
Twofold.
Yeah, Silkworth described it as, one, a physical allergy, basically. Once an alcoholic starts drinking, they trigger an uncontrollable craving for more. And two, a mental obsession, this overpowering drive that makes them take that first drink, even knowing all the terrible consequences.
That's huge. Shifting it from morality to medicine.
Absolutely groundbreaking at the time. And this direct, factual presentation from Bill, not a sermon, not a lecture, but delivered by another alcoholic who truly understood the suffering from the inside that was the breakthrough. It was identification plus critical information.
And the result?
History. June 10th, 1935. Dr. Bob sobered up, never to drink again. That date is celebrated now as the founding date of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wow.
And in his own story, in the big book, Dr. Bob actually italicized this key insight about Bill. He wrote, "Of far more importance was the fact that he was the first living human with whom I had ever talked, who knew what he was talking about in regard to alcoholism from actual experience."
That identification again, it was paramount.
Utterly. It allowed Dr. Bob to finally hear the message, not as judgment, but as a possible path to freedom. The information came from someone who got it, who'd been there. That shared experience built trust, allowed him to let go of that self-sufficiency, that feeling he had to figure it out alone, and finally accept help.
Like that quote about the glorious release from being all alone.
Exactly. That shift from just knowing about it intellectually to really accepting it mentally, becoming willing to try something different, that was the psychological key that unlocked everything for him.
Okay, so this pivotal meeting in Akron, it didn't just sober up one man. As you said, it lit the spark for a worldwide movement. But that initial environment must have been crucial. What was it actually like for those first few alcoholics trying to get sober together? And how did this group, the Oxford group, how did they influence things early on?
Yeah, the early AA meetings in Akron, they were very, very closely intertwined with the Oxford group. Now, the Oxford group, it was this evangelical Christian organization, popular in the early 20th century, really focused on personal change through applying specific spiritual principles.
Okay.
And Lois Wilson, Bill's wife, she actually started attending their meetings first at a place called Calvary House. She found, as Bill described it later and pass it on, a kind of enthusiasm and friendship that felt like manna from heaven.
So it provided a community, something they were missing.
Definitely. A supportive communal environment, which was obviously desperately lacking in the isolation of active alcoholism. And the key principles of the Oxford group, they called them the four absolutes: absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. These became really foundational for the early development of the AA program.
How direct was that influence, like the four absolutes mapping onto AA's steps?
Oh, quite direct. For instance, absolute honesty. That clearly paved the way for AA's step 4, right? The searching and fearless moral inventory, forcing you to confront your own truths. Absolute purity influenced the idea of clean living, sobriety, and absolute unselfishness and love. Well, they directly underscore the importance of service to others. Step 12, and compassion. These absolutes were seen as the path to living the lives God intended, and the early AA folks adapted them into a framework for getting sober.
That's fascinating. Such a direct link. But that strong religious flavor, the absolutes, the talk of open confession, even worrying about using the wrong Bible, that sounds like it could cause some friction, right? Especially if AA wanted to appeal broadly.
You're spot on. That close connection wasn't without its challenges. And this is really where AA started to carve out its own distinct identity.
Oh, so?
Well, Clarence S., one of the early Akron members, he recalled that some of the Catholic members, for example, had real issues with certain Oxford group practices.
Like what?
Things like their style of open confession, sharing sins publicly. That can clash with the Catholic tradition of confession to a priest. Also, the idea of receiving direct guidance from God. Some felt that might conflict with established church authority. And yeah, apparently even the specific Bible translation used was a point of contention for some.
Seriously, the wrong Bible.
Seriously. Clarence mentioned it led to a lot of flack on the drive home from meetings sometimes. It shows those early tensions, the practical hurdles of trying to mesh specific religious practices with a movement aiming for universal reach.
So how did Dr. Bob navigate that? What was the early Akron group like under his influence, given these potential tripwires?
Dr. Bob's group, yeah, it was often described back then as a Christian fellowship because, as Dr. Bob and the good old-timers notes, they started meetings with a prayer and ended them that way. This points to his pragmatic approach, using the spiritual resources readily available and being personally comfortable within that Christian framework.
But the goal was always sobriety.
Always. The primary purpose was crystal clear: stay sober. And the core method was one alcoholic helping another through shared experience and applying these spiritual principles practically. It wasn't about converting anyone to a specific denomination. It was about using a spiritual path, whatever worked, to get free from alcohol. The focus was always on results.
A real milestone then, proof
Mm.
of concept. So the emphasis stayed on practical recovery, mutual support, borrowing that spiritual framework, but always with the clear goal, sobriety, helping the next person.
Exactly. And that practicality, that focus was key. A major moment, a real sign of progress, happened in the fall of 1937. Dr. Bob and Bill W., they actually counted 40 cases who had significant dry time, maybe 60 years for the whole lot of them.
40 people sober, that must have felt huge.
Immense. Bill called it a beacon in the language of the heart. It showed that God had shown alcoholics how it might be passed from hand to hand. It was tangible proof their method wasn't a fluke. It worked. And it provided massive encouragement to keep going and to spread the word. It showed this was a reproducible solution.
So that practical focus, while rooted in the Oxford group, eventually led AA to evolve, right? To
Yeah.
become distinct.
Precisely. That Oxford group influence, while critical initially, eventually led to what the books call a split. It became clear that for AA to grow and reach all alcoholics, it needed to be more inclusive.
Like the issues Clarence S. raised.
Exactly. By early 1939, the Cleveland group, led by Clarence, was already moving away from the strict Oxford group affiliation because of those religious differences and practices that were barriers for some. It shows AA evolving, finding its own identity, emphasizing inclusivity, practical recovery over specific religious dogma.
Makes sense. It had to broaden its appeal.
It had to. It needed to welcome everyone, regardless of belief or non-belief, to effectively carry its message. That adaptability, born from hard experience and knowing its primary purpose, was essential for its universal appeal and why it endured. It ensured AA became a spiritual program, not a religious sect.
Okay, the title of our main source, Dr. Bod and the Good Oldtimers, it really puts his persona front and center. What kind of person was Dr. Bob, especially in recovery? Dealing with newcomers, it sounds like he had this very grounded, hands-on style.
Oh, absolutely. He was widely known as the kindly little doctor. That description comes up a lot, conveys warmth, humility, approachability. But, and this is important, it was coupled with a definite no-nonsense demeanor.
Kindly, but tough.
You could say that. He was deeply empathetic. Why? Because, as early members put it, Doc was just like we were. He connected through that shared experience. He recognized their pain, their struggles, because they were his own. That let him speak with real authenticity, real authority, but without ever sounding preachy or judgmental. They knew he'd walk the path.
And the directness, the no-nonsense part.
Well, that came out when needed, but always in service of sobriety. Dan Kay, one of his early patients, recalled that if Dr. Bob thought someone was being phony, trying to game the system, or not being honest, he'd tell them straight up.
Wow, really?
Yep. Confronted insincerity directly. And in another example, if someone used foul language during a meeting share, Dr. Bob might gently but firmly say something like, "You have a very good lead, young man, but it would be more effective if you cleaned it up a bit."
Ha. That's direct but constructive.
Exactly. It shows that blend. Directness, but tempered with compassion, always focused on the effectiveness of the message. He wasn't there to police morals. He was there to help people get sober. And that meant removing anything that might get in the way of someone hearing the message of recovery. It was about results, sobriety.
So unafraid to speak truth, but always for recovery, not judgment. Powerful distinction. Okay, what about his public persona? His role as AA started getting bigger, getting some recognition. Must have been tempting for a founder to, enjoy the spotlight a bit.
You'd think so, but Dr. Bob actively resisted that. Ed, another early member, pointed out that Dr. Bob never turned us down when asked to speak at local AA anniversary meetings. He was deeply committed to the fellowship, to the members right there.
But bigger events, public stuff.
That was different. His reluctance to speak at large gatherings or seek public attention, it wasn't really about shyness. It was more about his deep distaste for being regarded as a big shot. That phrase comes directly from Dr. Bob and the Good Oldtimers. He just didn't want the focus on him.
That ties right into the traditions, doesn't it? Placing principles before personalities.
Absolutely. It's a perfect embodiment of what would become Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Dr. Bob's personal example really helped safeguard the movement against ego, against individual fame corrupting the message.
Yeah, imagine if the founders had become celebrities.
It could have easily shifted the focus from the program, the principles, the shared experience to them, to their personalities. His humility protected the core message. As Daily Reflections points out, anonymity at the public level puts the brakes on anyone trying to exploit their AA connection for personal gain, power, or recognition. He lived that principle before it was even written down.
That humility is just profound, especially for someone so central to starting it all. It really underscores that spirit of selfless service. Okay, what about his practical day-to-day dedication to the 12th step, carrying the message? That's the lifeblood of AA, right? How did he do that?
His dedication to Step 12 was truly extraordinary. It wasn't just talk. Dr. Bob, along with his wife Anne and also Sister Ignatia, a Catholic nun who was incredibly important at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, they set an example for the practice of AA's 12th step that will remain. That's from Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age.
Sister Ignatia, at the hospital.
Yes, it was a real ministry, in the truest sense. They pioneered the idea of hospitalizing prospective AA members. This was revolutionary then. Alcoholics were usually seen as moral failures, maybe locked up, not treated medically in a hospital setting. Sister Ignatia, working closely with Dr. Bob, helped establish one of the very first hospital-based programs specifically for alcoholics.
So he helped them get medical care first.
He physically facilitated access to medical care, often helped them through acute withdrawal, and then introduced them to the AA program, often right there at their bedside. He'd frequently bring newcomers to his own home afterwards, too, offering a safe place, a direct introduction to the principles, and fellowship.
Wow, that's incredibly hands-on.
Totally hands-on. Direct action to help the sick and suffering, and the scale of it. The sources suggest Dr. Bob personally treated or guided something like 40,000 alcoholics during his lifetime.
40,000.
An astonishing number.
Yeah.
Guiding them through withdrawal, introducing them to AA. It just embodies that direct action, that service orientation that defines the good old-timer spirit. A practical, immediate, compassionate response to suffering.
It really contrasts with just abstract theory, doesn't it? It's about doing the work.
Exactly. His quiet, steady service was the perfect complement to Bill Wilson's more public organizational efforts. They formed this incredibly powerful duo. Bill provided the vision, the framework, the words. Dr. Bob demonstrated its practical application, the unwavering commitment to the suffering alcoholic one person at a time. That combination ensured AA was both a spiritual program and a practical, real-world solution.
Right.
So as AA started expanding, beyond just Akron and New York, it began to formalize things a bit, structure, principles. Yeah. And while Bill Wilson, he was often the main writer, the visionary behind the steps, and later the traditions.
Dr. Bob's influence was still there.
Oh, profoundly woven throughout, especially in the emphasis on unity, on practicality, and really guarding against self-interest and ego getting in the way. The traditions themselves, as Bill W. admitted, they weren't handed down from on high. They emerged from, quote, functional and important lessons, culled from the aftertaste, bitter and sweet of experience.
Lessons learned the hard way sometimes.
Often the hard way. They came out of real-world struggles, trial and error.
It's fascinating that it came from trial and error, not just top-down decree. That sounds remarkably democratic for the time. How did those early discussions, figuring out what this thing even was, impact its identity, especially something as basic as its name?
That's a critical point. That democratic spirit was there early on. Initially, Bill Wilson's draft of the Big Book, he called it Alcoholics Anonymous, with an apostrophe.
Possessive, like it belonged to an alcoholic.
Exactly. And many early members, especially the Akron crowd, they found that unacceptable as a title. This is noted in Not God, A History of Alcoholics Anonymous. They felt it put too much emphasis on the individual, maybe fed the ego. They'd been calling themselves things like a nameless bunch of alcoholics or even the 100 Men Corporation.
100 Men Corporation, why?
To emphasize that their success, the growing number of sober people, wasn't a fluke. It was a collective effort, something substantial. So this whole debate about the name, it really highlights that democratic spirit brewing the idea that this movement belonged to all of them, not just the founders.
That willingness to listen, to incorporate feedback, must have been crucial.
Absolutely. It showed respect for the collected experience. And get this, they actually sent out 400 multi-lith loan copies of the pre-publication Big Book for review.
400 copies. To whom?
To members, doctors, clergy, others. And it wasn't just to catch typos or medical errors or check if it might offend religious sensibilities. It was specifically because, as Not God says, alcoholics could be awfully critical people.
Huh, they knew their audience.
They did. But that act, sending out drafts for critique, it was actually quite revolutionary, a real act of democratic co-creation. It cemented the idea that this thing belonged to all alcoholics, and its wisdom would be collectively formed.
That democratic spirit, letting members shape it, clearly key to its endurance. So what about Dr. Bob's role in shaping the bigger organizational principles, the traditions? Even if Bill did the writing, his practical, grounded view must have been invaluable.
Absolutely invaluable. While Bill codified the 12 traditions, they grew out of years of those bitter and sweet experiences. Dr. Bob's steady presence, his grounded perspective, his absolute commitment to selfless service and anonymity that had to inform the discussions, his direct work with suffering alcoholics, his clear understanding of what was needed for an accessible, unified, uncorrupted message that undoubtedly shaped these guiding principles. He saw what worked and what failed in the trenches.
Can you give some examples how his pragmatism might connect to specific traditions?
Sure. Look at Tradition 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This ensures independence, prevents outside agendas from creeping in. Imagine if early AA took big money from, say, corporations or government.
Yeah, strings attached.
Exactly. That practical need for financial autonomy, keeping it focused purely on recovery, aligns perfectly with Dr. Bob's no-nonsense, self-reliant way of thinking. Or, Tradition 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers.
Protecting the peer support idea.
Precisely. It keeps it about one alcoholic helping another, prevents it from becoming a paid profession where people could be exploited. But it pragmatically allows for paid staff for necessary admin stuff, printing literature, answering phones, a practical balance.
Makes sense.
And Tradition 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. This is a hard lesson. They learned from early AA show-offs who, as the 12 and 12 says, got distressingly drunk and let their groups down with a bang.
Ouch. People going public, seeking fame, then relapsing.
Yep, damaged AA's reputation. So this tradition guards against ego, ensures the message is paramount, protects the group, and finally Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation. Principles before personalities. Dr. Bob's personal distaste for being regarded as a big shot, that is this tradition in action. It guards against grandstanding, keeps recovery humble and accessible.
So these traditions, they really capture the wisdom gained in those tough early years, protecting the core mission. It shows that blend of practical experience and spiritual insight, not just what they believed, but what they saw worked. That's foresight.
Okay, so Dr. Bob's pragmatic, no-nonsense style really anchored AA in practical, doable actions, making the spiritual stuff concrete. How do we see his influence today, woven into the core principles of recovery? How members actually approach staying sober day to day?
Well, his own unwavering sobriety, right, from June 10th, 1935 onwards. That was a powerful, living demonstration that the program worked. He embodied the power of absolute abstinence and the necessity of consistently working those steps. His life after getting sober was the proof these weren't just nice ideas, they were a workable way to live.
So his life demonstrated the core tenets.
Exactly. Take some core ideas made tangible by his example. First, the first drink. That's a simple idea. Just don't pick up that first drink. It's medically sound, experientially true for alcoholics. As Living Sober emphasizes, it's that first drink that triggers the compulsion sooner or later. Right? One drink is too many.
And 1,000 isn't enough. Dr. Bob's immediate permanent sobriety after his last drink just exemplifies this absolute necessity. He never had another first drink. It's the bedrock of practical sobriety.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the daily reprieve. The idea that sobriety isn't a permanent cure, like getting a vaccination. It's a daily reprieve, and it's contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. That's from the Big Book, echoed in study guides.
Meaning you have to keep working at it every day.
Every single day. Actively practicing the principles, self-reflection, helping others, spiritual connection, whatever that looks like for you. It echoes Dr. Bob's continuous commitment to service, to the principles, one day at a time. He lived it. Recovery is an ongoing process, a way of life, not a destination you arrive at and you're done.
And the first couple of steps, powerlessness, higher power.
His experience vividly validated. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. And step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Bill W. himself noted that it was Dr. Bob's ability to finally accept these facts that led to his release from the alcohol compulsion.
Because he couldn't do it on his own, despite trying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His previous inability to get sober, despite his knowledge, his professional standing, his earlier spiritual explorations, it just underscored his powerlessness over alcohol. That moment of surrender, realizing your own willpower isn't enough, that's where change begins. For Dr. Bob, finally achieving sobriety through the program validated the need for help from something beyond himself. It wasn't abstract theology, it was lived reality, a shift from self-will to reliance.
It really sounds like he was a walking, talking example of these principles in action, making them real for others. That's incredibly powerful. What about self-examination and helping others? Those are huge parts of the program, too.
Absolutely. His directness, remember, calling out the phonies, and his general honesty about his own past struggles, his own alcoholic logic that connects directly to step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory. And step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
The really tough honesty steps.
Right. They require, as the Little Red Book Study Guide puts it, clear thinking and a real willingness to admit mistakes, to own your past. Dr. Bob's ability to confront truth in himself and gently in others laid a practical foundation for these challenging but utterly transformative steps.
Yeah.
It takes compassion for yourself, as a woman's way through the 12 steps notes, but also that willingness to admit what you've done. His honesty about his own past was crucial.
And step 12, carrying the message.
Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening, we try to carry this message and practice these principles in all our affairs. This arguably is Dr. Bob's most profound, most enduring legacy. It's active, outward-focused. It directly fights that self-centeredness that's so often part of alcoholism.
He didn't just get sober and stop there.
Not at all. He lived a life of service, a life with purpose beyond himself. He apparently believed God's will for him was simply, as Daily Reflections puts it, that I practice step 12 on a daily basis. He connected his own spiritual growth directly, inextricably, with consistent, tangible service to others. That commitment, shown by his work with those thousands of alcoholics, it made the program a living, breathing reality. It showed the solution wasn't just about not drinking. It was about a whole new way of living, centered on helping others.
So his whole life, post-sobriety, was just a testament to the practical application of AA's spiritual program, proving these weren't just ideas, but a real workable design for living that leads to lasting change. He provided the blueprint, really, for living sober through service.
You know, it's often said, and it seems pretty accurate, that Bill Wilson was the visionary, the architect who saw the potential for this thing to go global. And Dr. Bob, he was the steady, practical anchor, grounding that vision in immediate, tangible help for the alcoholic who is still suffering right now.
A complementary dynamic.
Absolutely essential, not just beneficial, essential for AA's success and its structure. Without both of them, maybe the movement stays too local, too focused just on Akron. Or maybe it becomes too abstract, too philosophical, lacking that practical, hands-on element.
So if it was only Bill's vision, it might have just stayed an idea. And if only Dr. Bob's practicality, maybe it wouldn't have spread.
That's a good way to put it. Bill's vision needed Dr. Bob's tireless one-on-one service to make it real. And Dr. Bob's practical work needed Bill's ability to articulate a universal program, to give it structure and language so it could spread beyond Akron.
That balance sounds like a really delicate but powerful synergy. Can you point to specific examples from the sources, things that really highlight this partnership, how their different strengths work together?
Yeah, there are a few. Bill W. himself described that moment we talked about earlier when they counted noses in the fall of 1937, found those 40 sober cases.
Right, the 60 years of collective sobriety.
Exactly. Bill called it a great and humbling hour of realization, shared with Dr. Bob. That phrase, shared with Dr. Bob, it underscores the partnership. It was their shared success. Bill's ability to frame the program, combined with Dr. Bob's relentless, direct efforts in Akron, that's what yielded those concrete, life-changing results. A shared triumph, acknowledging both the vision and the practical work.
What about their leadership styles? You mentioned they were different.
Very different, and fascinatingly so. The sources, like Dr. Bob and the good old-timers, mention that Bill, especially on big movement matters, was likely to throw his ideas out to the whole membership for approval. But Lois Wilson, his wife, noted he actually made himself do it. It wasn't necessarily his natural inclination.
So Bill the visionary understood the need for consensus even if he preferred to just act.
Seems that way. He saw the importance of the democratic process. Dr. Bob, on the other hand, some members apparently thought he could be a bit of an autocrat in those kinds of matters,
Really,
maybe reflecting his surgical background. That directness, focus on immediate practical outcomes, maybe some impatience with inefficiency when lives were literally on the line. This contrast, this tension between their styles, have probably created a necessary check and balance. It helped shape AA's democratic structure, ensuring decisions were vetted, owned by the fellowship, not just dictated by one personality.
So one provided the big picture, the framework. The other grounded it in reality, in direct service, in the immediate needs of the suffering person. How did that balance, vision, and pragmatism, how did that contribute to AA's lasting impact? Its ability to help so many people across cultures, across generations.
It was potent, absolutely potent. Dr. Bob's direct clinical approach, remember, he was a surgeon combined with his personal experience as a seemingly hopeless alcoholic who found lasting sobriety. That gave this spiritual program this much-needed pragmatic foundation. Bill used the medical sledgehammer on Dr. Bob initially, yes, but then Dr. Bob embodied the steady, consistent application of the spiritual solution, day in, day out. He showed how abstract principles could be lived tangibly through acts of service.
Making it appeal to different kinds of people.
Exactly. The combination allowed AA to resonate with a huge range of individuals. Some might connect more with Bill's profound, electrically sudden spiritual experience. Others might need the straightforward, practical solution they saw demonstrated by Dr. Bob: just stop drinking, stay stocked, help others. It showed recovery was achievable through shared experience, mutual aid, consistently applying principles.
Accessible and sustainable.
Right. That accessibility, plus the focus on unity and anonymity that their combined strengths helped forge, made the program universally appealing and sustainable for decades. That ministry of Dr. Bob, his wife Ann, Sister Ignatia, and Akron's early timers, that set the indelible example for 12-step practice. It proved the solution wasn't in grand speeches, but in consistent, compassionate one-on-one service. Their partnership ensured AA was never just a philosophy. It was, and is, a living, breathing, effective path to sobriety for millions. Hashtag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life, the legacy of Dr. Bob, the good old-timer, it just seems crystal clear. His pragmatic, his humble, his deeply dedicated spirit, it was absolutely indispensable, not just to founding AA, but to its growth, its character. He wasn't just a co-founder. In many ways, he was the living, breathing embodiment of practical recovery.
Absolutely. His quiet, relentless service, his directness in helping others find sobriety, that unwavering commitment to carrying the message. It truly laid the groundwork, built the foundation for a movement that's still transforming lives all over the world. His story, it's a powerful reminder, isn't it? That profound change, it often isn't about the grand visions alone or the towering intellects. It's about consistent, compassionate action, one person helping another, one day at a time.
Indeed. So what does this all mean for you, listening? Dr. Bob's story, especially that distaste for being regarded as a big shot and his relentless dedication to the newcomer, the person still suffering, it raises a really important question, I think. In a world that so often celebrates the grand gesture, personal claim, the spotlight, where do you find the most enduring value? Is it in that spotlight? Or is it maybe found in the quiet, steady, often unseen work of helping just one other person achieve a profound, life-altering change?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Perhaps the greatest legacies, the ones that truly last, aren't built on fame at all, but on that kind of fundamental, selfless service.